Happy Tuesday, everyone. I'm here today with John Cochrane, the athletic director of Wartburg College, and selfishly, one of my favorite people. He's been a mentor for me for the last decade almost. A little bit about John, real quick. John's had a long career in college athletics. Not to date you too much, John, but 1989 is what I'm seeing, which is 5 years before I was born.
Damn typo.
Okay, so all the way back, John, maybe we'll get into later in the early 2000s when you were at NCAA working in the national office as an enforcement representative, all the way to the point of serving as commissioner for the Iowa Athletic Conference and now multiple athletic director roles, Cornell College in the past and now at Wartburg. John, I want to start off for the listeners. We all watch college sports. We love college sports. What's changed about college sports in the last couple of decades from your perspective?
God, what a long list this is. The obvious change is the money that has exponentially increased as a result of television and media rights primarily. Anytime you inject billions of dollars into any type of industry or business, or particularly an educational endeavor, from my perspective, the results are usually not positive. I mean, it creates temptations that weren't there. On the negative side, so it's all based on an increase in revenue. On the negative side, now there's temptations and a skewing of the character traits and values that are inherently instilled in being part of something bigger than yourselves. I think those concepts are largely becoming archaic, and replacing them is, on the flip side, depending on your perspective, is an increased level of equity, of access to resources that are generated, and access for those that are generating them. Those are largely the athletes, and you have a continued skewing of salaries, and does it make sense that, I mean, you still have, there's probably 200 to 300 coaches that make up to 5 to 10 times more than the president of the United States. And although you can say that about business and industry leaders as well across the world, but is that what we want in our higher education, as part of our institutions of higher learning in this country? So all of that, those aren't necessarily new concepts, but it's just continued to grow and expand over the course of the last 20 years, till we have something now in college athletics that would have been unrecognizable in 1990.
Yeah, and just thinking about, John, from the salary perspective, you hear like Coach Nick Saban, the highest publicly paid figure in X and Y. And when you think about it and put it in the perspective even of that college, how many is Nick Saban making more than all of the professors at the University of Alabama combined? And of course, there's the economic, like, well, he's bringing in this amount of money, and so it makes sense. But certainly a good reflection point. Are we investing money in the right places?
Intercollegiate athletics has shifted entirely from a student athlete experience focus to an entertainment focus, and that's what society has desired, demanded, and now created. And we can sit here and say whether that's right or wrong, but obviously the vast majority of consumers of at least intercollegiate sport has determined that's the direction they want this to go in.
Mm-hmm.
And for dinosaurs like me to sit here and complain about it is really a complete waste of time.
Yeah, and we can appreciate that you've had the experience of looking into investigations, right? You've had to investigate people who did take those temptations of money as an 18-year-old, as you would expect most 18-year-old immature people would when they have an opportunity to make money that's not technically how they're allowed to. Um, Without going down a rabbit hole there, John, what about the positives? What positives have you seen come from the change in collegiate sports over the last few decades?
Boy, it's so much harder to identify positives in terms of change from my standpoint. Again, we talked about the equity in resources and the NIL for many in your generation. The NIL is a long overdue thing for athletes to be able to realize some benefit from the use of their name, image, and likeness that had been prohibited for years. And if the NCAA probably had been more astute and proactive and forward thinking, they could have gradually worked with that issue alone and still preserve some of the things that have now been absolutely imploded that are not coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Right now the ship has left the dock now in terms of really trying to even call this amateur sport.
Mm-hmm.
And but it gets more visibility and notoriety now than I think it ever has. It's just as popular, if not more so, than it's ever been. There's just a different set of exterior rules that they're playing by, and depending on your perspective, again, whether that's positive or not. Um, my son was a Division I athlete and benefited a little bit. It was a mid-major institution, so certainly not the millions and millions of dollars being generated and thrown into his program. But
Mm-hmm.
certainly there's opportunities there for young people now to take advantage of the hard work and the effort and the diligence that they applied to preparing themselves to be a student athlete that were never there in the past. So from that standpoint, I think you could say it's really been a positive adjustment.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm glad you pointed that out. The name, image, and likeness has been a extremely positive thing because, as you know, with several kids who are athletes, there's a lot of time and effort that goes into sports. Tell me this, John, as an athletic director,
And
what
stress and disappointment
in stress and disappointment?
and self-reflection.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm gonna pause right there, and I'll be vulnerable for a minute and share a story because John, I can remember senior year, right after we finished our week 2 football game. I'd finally earned the title of becoming a starter, and the goal I'd been working toward for 4 years. And when I found out that I broke my hand and wouldn't be able to play, I found myself crying on the 50-yard line. I think it was a Monday after the Saturday game, and you came out to the field. And I don't know if you remember that day, but I do because it's crystal clear for me. And you just sat down with me, and you didn't even say anything. And I think that was a learning lesson for me that sometimes you don't have to have the right words to say. You just got to be there. You just got to be a friend and be there for someone and let them know that, hey, I'm here with you. Um, yeah. So.
I won't ever forget that day. I won't ever forget that day. And I got to give credit, Justin. I don't know if they've even told you this, but I received a call from your head coach that morning. from
Hmm.
Vince Brodegum. And he said, John, you need to get over to the field. He said, Justin is there and he's not in a great place.
Wow.
And I hung up the phone and I drove over there.
Wow. I didn't know that.
So
So I got to throw,
that's
thanks for sharing that.
that's the type of head football coach that you had there.
Yeah, that's amazing. And for listeners who have seen the tagline "Find a Way," that came from Coach Brodegum. That's been a value with me ever since. So let's stay right there on the value. One question I had for you, John. Back in the day, you went to law school. So I'm curious. You're in collegiate sports, right? You're an athletic director. You might not see a direct thread, or at least a common person might not see a direct thread. Tell me, is there a value or a lesson learned from law school that remains with you today?
For me, there was, there was the discipline that law school instilled. I was an undisciplined kid. I was an average. I didn't apply myself very well. I wasn't very mature for 22 years old. I wasn't ready to go into the working world. I really wasn't. I had no idea what hard work and aptitude and applying yourself academically meant.
Mm-hmm.
I learned it pretty quickly, and that was probably the most significant thing I took out of law school, Justin, was the discipline that it instilled, the ability to sit and just focus for long hours at a time. And that's just a skill set that I knew going in would be applicable to anything that I chose to do. And I chose law because I thought it might be something I was remotely interested in. I'm a history buff, so there's some transferable. You study historical cases and case law and that kind of thing. So there was some transferable interest, but from that standpoint, and it enabled me personally too to do an internship in the University of Iowa athletic department, and I worked with Fred Mims for 2.5 years, and that was really my entree into athletics. He single-handedly gave me the opportunity to pursue this career.
That's awesome. Hey, thanks for sharing that. Discipline, hard work, aptitude, 3 traits that certainly are transferable to all professions and just life in general. John, question: What do you get excited about when you wake up every day?
I get excited about.
What gives you energy?
That's a really good question. So in terms of my professional life, so let me answer that 2 different ways.
Yeah.
I think you were probably going down the professional life way, and I get excited every day to come in here and see what I can do to enhance the quality of the experience for the young men and women in our program. And that's why I've always been in athletics. And I find myself frustrated as often as not in that endeavor, because there's things that I think this is easy fix. Let's get this done. Let's do it. And invariably there's roadblocks that come up, and I shift gears and look for another way. So I would say that alone. My whole professional career has been a desire to have some impact, no matter how small, on the lives of young people. And I found athletics and even athletic administration has given me the avenue to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's switch to personal.
My personal life would revolve around the life of my kids, Justin. And I get up every day trying to think about what they're doing that day, and how proud I am of what they're involved with and who they are. I can say with the utmost certainty that all 3 of my kids are much better people than I am, and I wish that on every parent. I wish that for every parent. And so those are some of the things that excite me. The other things, kind of my hobbies, is military history. I'm a military history geek, it does excite me. Of the paranormal, it excites me. The question of whether or not there's alien life that's been among us, and what does our government know, and what have they been involved with? Those types of questions fascinate me.
Well, I'm going to open up one of those can of worms here in a minute, but we'll put the pause on it because I want to ask you one question before that. John, when you took the position at Wartburg College, I remember someone sent me the article link and I read it. And what caught my attention was you said your first objective was to secure the trust of the team. And that included the staff and the student athletes. Can you tell us, expand on that?
Well, I think that's a prerequisite to leadership, and it's not the most important thing, but it's certainly one of them. Um, I believe the most important thing in leadership is unselfishness. That is the single most significant characteristic of effective leadership. And I'll ask you, Justin, how many of the leaders that you've experienced in your life, the most effective ones, the most impactful, did you view as selfish, thinking about themselves first, putting themselves before the well-being and interest of the larger group? And my thought has always been, if I can't completely unselfishly be more concerned about the well-being of others than my own, and put their interests and success and credibility and visibility before mine, then a leader cannot expect anybody they're trying to lead to have those same types of characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, my desire to build that trust with the people I work with and for, in the case of student athletes, I thought was just a critical component, particularly at a time of the year starting in January, in the middle of the year, where their lives are already full speed. It's a completely different time period to start in athletics as opposed to July 1st. July 1st and January 1st, as you know, in an athletic department, are two different worlds. And I was coming into a fairly already a fast-paced, pretty intense world.
Yeah, no doubt. And I just want to reiterate the unselfishness characteristic that you pointed out, because thinking about your question, I can't think of any leaders who are selfish, who I look at as selfish. I don't even know if I could find one instance when I can remember it. And so thank you for sharing that, and I hope all listeners reflect on that. John, as we wrap up here, I want to ask you a fun question.
All right.
History buff.
Come on.
If you could have a cup of coffee, I know you like coffee. I see you're drinking water now, but I love
this question. I love this question.
If you could have a cup of coffee with anyone in history, who would it be?
Alexander the Great.
Tell us why.
Alexander the Great was 19 years old and had the largest empire in the history of the world up to that time. I mean, that's unbelievable. 19 years old, and he took an army across the Eurasian Peninsula and completely subdued the largest empire in the world, the Persian Empire, in the span of two years. An empire
and that's comparable to a sophomore in college.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I was 19 at the end of my freshman year. I mean, I was a blithering idiot, and he's leading the finest army in the world. So that's one. And maybe the other would surprise you. It'd be Joan of Arc. Again, a young, really a girl in the Middle Ages, who led the armies of France, the most powerful nation in the world, again at the age of 19. And I'm fascinated by that type of maturity and ability to do things at those ages. I just think it's just an incredible thing.
That's amazing. Alexander the Great and Joan of Arc.
There you
How
go.
about that?
Yeah, there you go. You probably won't get too many people to answer that question that way.
All right, John, what you got one chance for a final word. Anything else you want to share?
No, man, I think the world of you, Justin. I appreciate you having me on, and I've admired you and who you are since the day you walked on the campus at Cornell College. To see your continued success and gives me a great deal of happiness. Thanks for sharing a few minutes with me today.
My pleasure. Thank you, John. Thank you for the not iterations. I'm looking for a different word. Really, just instilling the reminders of discipline, hard work, aptitude, as we think about leadership, to be unselfish, to think about leaders who we appreciate in life and respect, and let's think about that. Were they selfish leaders, and can we take away that unselfishness trait? I'm going to do some digging on Joan of Arc. I don't know much about her, so I'm curious now.
Spend a little time. Well worth your time, Justin. Well worth your time.
All right, listeners, have a great week. Thanks, John.
You take care.